Welcome to Naked Spirituality, a video blog series of sacred attention therapy. My name is Rob Meager. For more information about sacred attention therapy and our video blog series, please visit our website at www.sacredattentiontherapy.com. These video blogs are intended to be spontaneous, unscripted dialogues between myself and other participants of the Sacred Attention Therapy study group. We use these video blogs to dive deeper into discussions emanating from the study group. Our guest today is Oliver Baum. Oliver is practice director and lead therapist at the OWL practice in Surrey, United Kingdom. Oliver is also a member of the Sacred Attention Therapy project team and teaching faculty for the Sacred Attention Therapy online training. Oliver's website is www.theowlpractice.co.uk, and we'll be repeating that website address in the scrolling credits at the end of the video. Oliver and I intend to discuss ancestral tide, and at this time I'm going to invite Oliver to come on screen. Hello, Oliver.
Hi, Robert.
Nice to be with you.
Good to see you too.
This topic, ancestral tide, it's the focus of Module 3, Family Beliefs, of the Sacred Attention Therapy Online Training Level 1. And to begin, because this might be a term that's very new to some people. I know with some social media advertising and responsive in getting to the SAT online training, some people have expressed great excitement, great interest in this idea of ancestral tide being brought back into their life. And I thought it would be a good idea to begin of what is the ancestral tide? What's it mean to you, Oliver?
To me, it's mostly been about all the inherited beliefs, introjects, everything that's sort of been taken on board by an individual from their family, from society, from culture, but also transgenerationally as well. The flow of potentially, if it's all going well, the flow of love that goes from generation to generation. And that's very much my focus, looking at the benefits being may have, as well as letting go of sort of any of the negative sides or the stuff that's getting in the way of personal development.
Mm-hmm. I liked that metaphor of the flow between the generations. And I have my own affectionate term for ancestral tide. I call it the ancestral tidal wave because sometimes it can feel like a tidal wave. And I just wanted to share this one passage. It's just one paragraph from, it's actually the manuscript from the Module 3, Family Beliefs, and you may recognize this. It's from Richard Harvey. He writes, "Family beliefs arise on the tide of ancestry as one generation after another has impacted, influenced, and affected the next. Prejudices and beliefs are reinforced and strengthened over years, decades, and centuries, in the collective unconscious as much as in the family's shared awareness. As much as we appear to know about the origins of our family beliefs, we must in the end understand that the genuine origins are lost far, far back in time." And so it offers us, again, that continuity, that idea of continuity among and between the generations. Oliver, you have a keen interest in ancestral tide.
Yeah.
Where did that interest come from?
Originally it came from having children. When my first my eldest son was born, I sort of look back at my childhood, which I was in the process of doing anyway. I suppose that was when it first really struck me how much had been passed on, how much I'd taken on, pretty unconsciously. And I became very aware of what I did and didn't want passing down through the generations. So it was very much becoming a parent that got me very interested in it. Also, my background in business. I mean, my family originally came from a 7-generation family business.
Mm.
So I grew up really seeing. I'm trying to think of a kind way of putting this, but certainly the drama would be one way of putting it. That can come with that,
Mm-hmm.
and the infighting and the arguments, and there was positives too from it. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose I've always been very aware of that from a very young age, and also aware of a desire to do something different, and to be something different, and not, I suppose, the traditional male absent father.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't what I wanted for me or for my children. So there was a part of me sort of going against and rebelling against um, my past,
Mm.
which actually became counterproductive. That rebellion can keep you as tied as being the good boy who goes with the
Mm-hmm.
beliefs.
You're very intuitive because I was and want to go in the direction that you've offered me. You talked about the drama
Mm,
that exists within families, and you talked about growing up as a young boy and then raising your own family. Why did you want to become a parent, Oliver?
probably family beliefs, actually.
Mm.
it's kind it's what it was. I mean, there was an inherent drive to want to become a father, but also there's an element of it that it was the done thing. You know, you get married at a certain, or I got married at a certain age. The next phase is get a dog and then get the children, and then um, um, and I think and I certainly, there was an element of me that walked into that at that
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And then got the awareness later on. And I certainly with clients that I've worked with in the past, a lot of people sleepwalk into marriage, into having children, and then if they're lucky, at some point they wake up and think,
Mm.
I can make something different of this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, an old analogy I use is that quite often at a wedding, you've got a 12-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy lying to each other. And they're doing it with the best of intentions and a lot of love in their hearts, but it comes
Mm.
from developmentally naive, should we say, place.
Mm. Mm. This wonderful expression, sleepwalking into parenthood.
Yes.
I think one could probably say that one sleepwalks into life, and if one is lucky, if one is very lucky, you
Yeah.
wake up at a point. Um, how do you think your childhood, um, in its broadest sense, how do
Yeah.
you think it influenced your being a parent today?
Um, that's a big question. It's in, I mean, it's influenced more than just being a parent. I had, I mean, just as by way of an example, even down to my chosen career. Um, as a child, at the age of 6, I have very fond memories of playing in a garden around a yew tree with my grandmother,
Mm.
and just being vaguely aware of some rather strange people sort of in this garden, sitting around doing various things. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s and after I started training that I realised that there was actually an institution. So, and and I remember feeling incredibly at home there and having a wonderful time. And
Mm.
these little seeds that get planted as we grow up, which aren't always a negative.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
as far as being a parent goes, from a male perspective, um, I mean, my father worked very, very hard, and still does. And I remember having to get up at sort of 4:30 in the morning to get a 15-minute window of spending some time with him.
Mm.
Um, and you can imagine at that time in the morning he wasn't particularly receptive to this sort of very young little boy sort of running around.
Yeah.
And I suppose I didn't want that. And I was, with what I used to do previously, I was working 18-hour days, 7 days a week, and did so for 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
And then my eldest came along, and it made me realise, hang on a sec, I'm going to go down the same path, not careful. And that's when I, sold the business and changed fields.
Now, you mentioned about 5 minutes ago that you wanted to do something different
Mm.
as a parent than you had yourself either been at the receiving end or had experienced as a small boy growing up.
Yeah,
Um, and that drove you in part into a different kind of parenting.
yeah,
Um, is that an accurate statement?
yeah, yeah.
What is it that you wanted to do differently? You've already shared a little bit, but what did you want to do differently as a parent? And Oliver, let me back that up by saying, um, now at this point in my life, I have the utmost respect for parents. I'm not a parent. I'm a parent of a dog and many animals and many plants, but I'm not a parent of another human being. And I watch in awe at parents who consciously or unconsciously get themselves into this this relationship,
Mm.
and I'm in awe at it. I used to be resentful of it previously, okay, but resentful from the perspective of they shouldn't be parents, and was loaded with judgments, But so I just wanted to reveal myself as I'm not a parent, all right, and so when I ask you, what did you want to do differently as a parent than you experienced growing up? Know that um, I'm I not yet have chosen that path in my life.
Yeah. So what did I want to do that was different? I, it's interesting. I suppose for me, and again, this was probably quite an unconscious process when it happened. It was almost when my eldest son was born that a bit of my soul came back, something that had got lost. All of a sudden, there was a bigger picture to look at, more than just me scurrying around trying to make a living and do whatever it was I was doing before. So I wanted to embrace that,
Mm.
and I wanted to be there. And I suppose what I didn't want to do, or I would love, with the best will of the world, I would love to say I've never done this, but it's not true. I didn't want to put as much, or wanted to minimise the amount of my stuff, my ancestral stuff, onto my children. I wanted them to be free to find themselves.
Mm.
And that is probably, certainly has been one of the hardest things to do. I've got one son who's a kickboxer and the other who's a ballet dancer, so they're very different people. So it's stick me in a ballet, I'm fine. The kickboxing's harder.
You're the marriage of MMA and another form of artistic expression
Yeah.
in ballet. Um, let's switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
You have a counseling therapy practice,
Mm.
the L practice. And how have you found that you've integrated
Yeah.
the sacred attention therapy teachings of ancestral tide into your practice?
For me, it widens the scope of the work.
Mm-hmm.
As a practitioner, there's an awareness of a bigger picture than just the person who's there sat in front of me. So it's not just about honouring them and their experience, but also what's gone before, um,
Mm.
as well as how that will then impact on going into the future.
Mm.
With couples work, it's invaluable because the idea of two family systems coming
Mm.
together to create a third system and all the, well, everything that's involved in that, which is pretty much everything,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
is a potentially hugely growthful area, but it's also potentially very damaging and explosive in many
Mm.
ways. So,
I don't know what you find, Oliver, but I find, generally speaking, people are very hesitant, reluctant, resistant to want to talk about their family, and their family experiences in growing up. It's not
mm,
something that I find too many people welcome. And yet, as trained therapists and counselors, most of what we see is rooted in,
yeah.
early family beliefs. And in your practice, in your therapy counseling practice, do you find clients are amenable to talking about, without being how should I say, strongly influenced,
Mm.
to go there? Do you find clients are welcoming of the opportunity to explore their early childhood and their family beliefs?
I would say whether they are or they aren't, or wherever they are on that scale, um, says a lot about their family beliefs. Therapy, I suppose, is an act of disloyalty in some ways. And
Yes.
I mentioned that. Um, and there is an inherent guilt within that, I think. So when someone, certainly for the first session, sits down and say, "Oh, tell me a bit about your relationship with your parents," or whatever it might be, um, more often than not, it was, "Oh yes, my upbringing was really good. Yes, my parents did divorce at 7, but that was okay. That had no effect on me. And yes, I was ferrying messages backwards and forwards and moving and and all this." So there can be almost a detachment, certainly from the feeling side of what went on. They may be able to talk about the story, but they don't like the idea that it may have had an effect on them.
Yes.
Um, and I think certainly um, guilt and that sense of being disloyal and to the parents is very key in that, at a probably quite a young level.
And you bring up, and it's a critical point, and it's a very important point, this act of disloyalty that's perceived on the part of the client, um, for talking about,
Yeah.
family and family experiences. I remember so often what became entrenched in my psyche, and I didn't realize the impact of this, of course, until years later. But that's the way it goes as we developed, psychologically. I remember, a member, the matriarch of the family, so often saying, "We don't talk about our problems."
Yeah.
You know, when you knew there was a family crisis, either because it was going on, or because you sensed it was going on around you and it was trying to be hidden. When somehow intuitively you started to inquire, the messaging you got is, "We don't talk about our problems outside of the family." And it becomes such a pivotal moment for the individual to break out of or break away from that paradigm of thinking and to let go of this belief in this act of disloyalty. And it's such a freeing experience to begin to explore it, to begin to discover all the illusions in reality around it all. But do you find the majority of your clients um, experience that cathartic freedom once they begin to explore it?
I do, and I think it can happen quicker um, than might be expected with a lot, partly down to the way I work, but because I integrate family constellations work into my work.
Yes.
But it is incredibly freeing because rather than sort of having that tidal wave in front of you and trying to do a King Canute and pushing it back, um, by looking at it and accepting it in some ways that things weren't perfect. With the best will in the world, I could see my children in therapy in however many years' time, and I know what I've done won't be perfect. Hopefully it's been good enough, but it certainly won't be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's something in that acknowledgement and the almost being able to turn around and face into our own futures as mature adults, whatever they might be, and and I suppose taking the blame element out of, oh, it's my mother's fault, it's my father's fault, and being able to grow up and move forward is an incredibly freeing movement.
Hmm. You just mentioned your work in family constellations, and you
Yeah.
brought this up in conversations we've had before. Tell me about, first of all, tell me about the family constellation aspect of your practice.
Well, I mean, you mentioned, as far as my practice goes, it's, as much as anything, it's the method, it's a way of getting to those pieces of history that have been lost in time that we can't really know on a literal level.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, if you think even just in the 20th century or the history that we've been through, 2 world wars, etc., 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 there's a lot of transgenerational trauma in every culture, in every society.
Mm-hmm.
Be able to get in touch with that and really feel that. Again, it can be freeing rather than carrying it as a burden.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes almost a liberating force that helps push people forward into themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose the way I liken it I mean, parents will pretty much all parents, however they may act it out in reality, if asked, would say that they want the best for their children. They want their children to be happy. And for me, that's a permission for the child to go and find out what that means for them. What is their truth? What is their life about?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's how do family beliefs and family constellations um, differ, and how are they the same? Is does one complement the other, and vice versa?
I think they do complement each other in many ways. Where they're the same, there's something about handing back responsibility for
Mm.
sort of owning what is ours, but handing back the responsibility of the things that we've taken on for our parents, whatever they may be. I mean,
Mm.
I spent years trying to give up smoking. And I remember the first time I having a cigarette, just saying, well, my mum smokes, so it must be fine. I'll do this for her. And it was as if I was smoking for her, so she would be okay.
Right.
And once I unpicked that, then actually I was free to stop smoking.
Yeah.
So there's an element of handing back the responsibility, handing back the beliefs that aren't necessarily mine, and this is the same for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and being free to live in our own faith
Mm-hmm.
and in our own, I suppose, become autonomous, authentic people.
Mm-hmm. It's a courageous act to want to become authentic.
Yeah,
A very courageous act. Equally courageous to want to discover that authenticity through the journey of parenting,
yes,
and and equally a courageous act to want to explore one's family beliefs, whether they do it through the practice of family constellation
yeah,
or the tools contained therein, or through sacred attention therapy, and again module 3 in the online training on family beliefs focuses primarily on the discussion of ancestral tide, although it weaves in and out of many of the modules as part of the sacred attention therapy online training.
yeah.
Oliver, I would like to leave I just wanted to thank today. You for our time here today, for this discussion about ancestral tide, and hopefully we can share other discussions like this in the future.
That would be great. And thank you for the opportunity, Robert.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.